The night before my son's wedding, his fiancée leaned close to me, smiled like she was sharing a secret, and whispered, "After tomorrow, you won't be part of this family anymore. You're just extra baggage." I stood there, frozen, my smile plastered on, while my heart cracked wide open, and I said nothing. That silence changed everything. Sounds unbelievable, right? But that's exactly what happened. My name is Eleanor. For 27 years, it was just me and my son, Ethan. I never planned on being a single mom. Ethan's father left when he was only 2. One quick phone call, a half-hearted apology, and then nothing. He vanished. From that day on, I had no choice but to be both mom and dad. I worked as a nurse in one of San Francisco's busiest hospitals. My life was 12-hour shifts, running from patient to patient, barely finding time to breathe. Some nights I dragged myself home at 3 a.m., still smelling like antiseptic, and went straight to fixing Ethan's shoes, or cooking a simple pot of soup so he wouldn't grow up on dollar menu fast food. I passed on promotions, turned down dates, skipped weekends away, because if I wasn't there, Ethan had nobody. That was my whole truth. His safety, his future, his happiness. So fast forward 27 years. My son is about to get married, a self-made tech entrepreneur, building companies with ideas I could barely wrap my head around. And me? I was still just his mom, showing up with a scrapbook full of memories. His first baseball uniform, the beat-up car we bought for $500, the little apartment where we survived together. I thought he'd open it, smile, and maybe hug me, whispering, "Thanks, Mom." But no. Instead, Sophia, his bride-to-be, looked me dead in the eye at the rehearsal dinner, leaned in so no one else could hear, and cut me down to dust. "Tomorrow you're nothing but extra baggage. Don't come. Don't ruin our moment." Do you know what it feels like to be erased from your own child's life in a single sentence? It's like every night shift, every missed birthday of my own. Every sacrifice I ever made was tossed in the trash. And Ethan? He was just a few feet away, laughing with his groomsmen, completely unaware that his fiancée had just shoved his mother out into the cold. Maybe you're thinking, why didn't you just tell him right then? Believe me, I wanted to. But I looked at him. I saw the way his eyes lit up when he looked at Sophia, the joy bubbling out of him. And I couldn't be the one to smash that happiness, at least not that night. I thought, let him have one last evening of peace. The truth will come out soon enough. So I left. I got in my car, drove through the glowing streets of San Francisco, and parked outside my tiny apartment. I just sat there for a while, staring at my hands. These tired nurses' hands that had held him when he was sick, cheered for him at every school game, worked themselves raw to pay for his dreams. Hands that suddenly felt useless, unwanted, shaking from humiliation. Being called extra baggage by the woman about to marry my son. It cut deeper than any insult I've ever known. I couldn't stop thinking about the nights Ethan was a little boy, waiting up for me when my shift ran too long. I'd walk through the door exhausted, and there he'd be, tiny body curled around a worn-out teddy bear. Once, when he was 8, I broke down crying at the kitchen table, and Ethan, sweet Ethan, patted over in his pajamas, patted my back with that little hand and whispered, "Don't worry, Mom. When I grow up, I'll take care of you." That promise kept me alive on nights when I wanted to quit. And here I was, 20 years later, being told I wasn't even welcome at his wedding. The truth is, I had seen warning signs all along. Sophia was charming in public, polished, the kind of girl people instantly warmed up to. But behind closed doors, when it was just her and me, her eyes turned cold. She rolled her eyes at my home-cooked Thanksgiving meals, brushed off family traditions, acted like my contributions were embarrassing relics from another era, Every suggestion I made for the wedding, tiny things like inviting my sister or using the heirloom tablecloth, I'd watch her politely nod and then ignore me completely. It was clear she was pushing me out of the picture. But I kept swallowing it down, telling myself, if Ethan's happy, I'll deal with it. I'll stay quiet. That's what moms do, right? We eat our pride to make room for our kids' joy. That night, though, I opened the scrapbook on my coffee table. Page after page of Ethan's life stared back at me. His toothless grin in the Little League, his awkward high school graduation photo, the two of us standing outside that first apartment with chipped paint and a broken heater. I thought the book would remind him of where he came from, of us. Instead, it had become the symbol of how disposable I was to Sophia, so I made a decision. I wasn't going to the wedding. I closed the book, pressed my palm flat against its cover, and whispered to myself, "Enough, Eleanor. He needs to see for himself. You don't have to beg for a seat at your own son's wedding." And yet, deep down, I held on to a sliver of hope. Hope that somehow in the middle of all that glitter and glamour, the truth would crack through. Hope that Ethan would finally see Sophia for who she really was. I didn't know when or how, but I knew I couldn't walk into that ceremony carrying the weight of humiliation on my shoulders. So I went to bed, heart heavy, tears soaking the pillow. And I had no idea that by the end of the next day, the wedding wouldn't happen at all, that everything Sophia had tried to hide would blow up in public, and me, the extra baggage, would be the one standing steady while her world came crashing down. I didn't go. I stayed home. I told myself that was my line in the sand. No begging, no forcing my way in where I wasn't wanted. But when the clock struck noon, when the church bells started echoing across the neighborhood, I couldn't help but picture it. The white dress, the flowers, my son standing at the altar, grinning like he'd finally found forever, and me, sitting in silence, holding the scrapbook I'd made, wondering if I'd just lost him for good. I kept the TV off. No distractions, just the ticking of the old clock in my kitchen and the sound of my own breath. My heart felt like it was pacing a marathon, even though I hadn't moved an inch. And then my phone buzzed. One text, then another, then 10. My sister, my coworkers, even neighbors who barely knew us. The same message over and over. "Eleanor, are you seeing this? Turn on the live stream." My hands shook as I grabbed the remote, and there it was, broadcast online for the whole world to see. The wedding. Except it wasn't a wedding anymore. Ethan stood at the altar, his face pale, fists clenched. Guests whispering, shifting in their seats. Sophia nowhere in sight. And then, out of nowhere, his best man walked up, holding a tablet, face red with anger. "I can't let you do this, bro," he said, voice shaking, but loud enough for the microphone to pick up. "You need to see what I found last night." The entire room gasped. He tapped the screen, and suddenly, on the projector, meant for wedding photos, flashed something else entirely. Pictures, dozens of them. Sophia, in another man's arms. Not just any man, her boss. Clear as day, time-stamped from just weeks before the wedding. Her laugh, her lips pressed against his, her body language leaving no doubt. The sound in that church turned into chaos. Gasps, whispers, someone shouting, "Turn it off!" But it was too late. The truth was, up there, 10 feet tall for every guest to see. And my son? Ethan's face crumbled. I saw it live, thousands of miles away, but still close enough to feel the blow. His whole body swayed like he'd just taken a punch to the chest. I covered my mouth with both hands, whispering, "Oh, Ethan, my boy, my only boy." But it didn't stop there. Someone, maybe the best man, maybe one of Ethan's friends, dropped another bombshell. A document, printed and highlighted, waving in the air like a victory flag. And this is the prenup she tried to get him to sign last week. Look at this clause. Look at it. The camera zoomed in as the paper was shoved toward Ethan. Even through the blur of the live stream, I could make out the words. If Ethan divorced Sophia, or if the marriage ended within 5 years, half his startup equity would transfer to her family. Not to Sophia personally, her family, who just so happened to be drowning in debt. The pieces slammed into place like a puzzle I didn't want to see finished. The charm, the manipulation, the way she froze me out of every plan. It wasn't about Ethan. It was about what Ethan could give her. My son staggered back from the altar, eyes wide, chest heaving. Guests were standing now, yelling, pointing. Some people walked out. Others pulled out their phones, recording everything like vultures circling roadkill. And me? I sat on my couch crying silently. I wanted to run to him, to hold him, like I did when he was little, to tell him, I'm here. We'll get through this, but all I could do was watch him break in real time, alone in front of 100 people. Sophia finally appeared, storming into the shot, mascara streaked, hair half fallen from her updo. She grabbed the mic, shrieking, "This is all lies!" He's obsessed with me. He photoshopped everything. But the pictures were too clear, the timestamps too exact. And when Ethan's best man turned and shouted back, "I was there, Sophia! I saw you with him!" The last shred of her defense collapsed. The officiant just stood there, Bible in hand, completely useless. Guests streamed out, muttering. The music stopped. The flowers, the lights, the endless planning. It all dissolved into chaos. And Ethan? He ripped the boutonniere off his jacket, threw it on the ground, and walked away. Just like that. Ceremony over, marriage over, forever shattered. I turned off the TV and sat in silence. My chest ached so hard I thought I might actually faint, because here was the truth. As much as I hated Sophia, as much as she had humiliated me, I never wanted Ethan to feel this kind of pain. Betrayal at the altar, the world watching as his dream crumbled into dust. I sat there whispering, "Please, God, give him strength. Please let him see he still has me." The texts kept pouring in. Some people cheering that Sophia got exposed, others asking if I'd had anything to do with it, rumors flying before the flowers were even cleared from the church. And deep down, I knew. This wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. Because women like Sophia don't go down quietly. She would twist it. She would find a way to turn the story around. And when she did, I'd be her first target. But for that one moment, sitting in my small living room with the scrapbook still on the table, I let myself breathe. The truth was finally out. And though my son's heart was shattered, at least he was free from her web of lies. I closed my eyes, wiped the tears off my face, and whispered the same words I'd whispered 20 years ago when he was just a boy. We'll get through this, Ethan. Somehow we'll get through this, if you thought the wedding disaster was the end of it. Oh no, that was just the opening shot. Sophia didn't walk away quietly. She turned her humiliation into a weapon and aimed it straight at me. The morning after the canceled wedding, I woke up to a storm I never saw coming. My phone buzzed nonstop. Notifications, missed calls, messages stacked on top of each other. At first, I thought it was people checking on Ethan, offering support, maybe even a few words of kindness for me. I was wrong. The first headline I saw nearly made me drop my coffee. Jealous mother sabotages son's wedding. Right below it, a filtered picture of me, one someone had yanked off Ethan's Facebook, frowning at a family barbecue. The caption? Toxic mom couldn't let go, ruins her son's big day. I felt my stomach twist into knots. My hands shook so badly I nearly spilled the mug. And then came Sophia's post, slick, polished, with just the right balance of heartbroken bride and innocent victim. She wrote, "Yesterday should have been the happiest day of my life." Instead, Ethan's mother spread lies and even manipulated people close to us to stage a public humiliation. All I ever wanted was to love him, but she couldn't handle another woman in his life. The comments rolled in like wildfire. Wow, how could a mom do that to her own son? This is next-level jealousy. Poor Sophia, she deserves better. Hundreds of them, thousands even, strangers spitting venom at me, believing every word she typed. I sat there staring at the screen, my breath coming shallow. My chest hurt like I was being crushed under a weight I couldn't push off. Then, bang. A knock on the door, loud, aggressive. When I opened it, a man in a suit shoved an envelope into my hands. "You've been served," he muttered before walking away. Inside, legal papers. Sophia's family was suing me. Defamation, interference with contractual relations, words I had to Google because they sounded like another language. But the meaning was clear. They were dragging me to court, blaming me for destroying the wedding and humiliating their daughter. I sat on the couch, papers spread out on the coffee table, tears dripping onto the black and white print. My mind raced. How? How could she twist it this far? How could she paint herself as the victim after cheating, after scheming? But Sophia was clever. Her family was connected. They spun the story fast, feeding it to bloggers, influencers, anyone willing to bite. Soon my face was everywhere, plastered with labels like controlling, obsessive, toxic. And Ethan? My sweet boy? He was silent. He locked himself away, turned off his phone. I couldn't blame him. He'd just had his heart ripped out in front of the world. But the silence cut deeper than any headline. One night, I got a voicemail from an unknown number. Sophia's voice, dripping with venom. "Thought you won, huh? Thought you destroyed me? No, Eleanor, I'll destroy you. Ethan will hate you by the time I'm done. You'll die alone, and everyone will know you're nothing but a bitter old nurse who couldn't let go." I replayed it 3 times, hands trembling. Every word sank like poison into my skin. But here's the thing. You can only push a mother so far. And that night, something inside me snapped. I looked around my small apartment, the scrapbook on the table, the photos on the wall, the years of sacrifice written in every wrinkle on my face. And I said out loud, to nobody but myself, "No more. You picked the wrong mother to mess with." The next day, I called in favors. I started digging. Every whisper I'd heard about Sophia's family's financial problems. Every questionable business deal her father had been tied to. Every late-night call that didn't make sense. I pulled threads until I found knots. And then I reached out to someone I hadn't spoken to in years. An old patient's son who'd become an investigative journalist. I told him everything, sent him screenshots, forwarded the voicemail. I gave him names, documents, trails. He listened. He didn't promise, but he said 8 words that lit a fire in me. If it's true, we'll get the story out. For the first time since that awful whisper at the rehearsal dinner, I felt a spark of power in my chest, a flicker of hope, because maybe, just maybe, the truth could cut through the lies, but it wouldn't be easy. Sophia was still out there, crying on live streams, milking sympathy, turning Ethan's silence into proof of my guilt. The world loved her performance, the villain mom, the poor bride. It was perfect clickbait. Still, I had something stronger than spin. I had facts. And I had a bond with my son that no smear campaign could erase. So I waited, patiently, quietly, gathering everything like ammunition. Because one day soon, when the truth hit daylight, it wouldn't just bruise Sophia's reputation, it would burn her whole facade to ash. And in that moment, as I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair, I whispered the same words I'd whispered in the church parking lot, in the hospital hallways, in the darkest corners of motherhood. Hold on, Ethan. Mama's not done fighting. They thought I'd stay quiet. They thought they could bury me under lawsuits, hashtags, and headlines. But lies have short legs, and when the truth finally stood up, it ran faster than anything Sophia could chase. The journalist called me 3 weeks later. His voice was calm, steady, but I could hear the electricity behind it. "Eleanor," he said, "we verified everything. Her family's dead, the prenup scheme, the affair. We've got witnesses, documents, and bank records. The story dropped Sunday morning. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Sunday, just a few days away. My stomach flipped like I was on the edge of a roller coaster. This was it. This was the moment." That Sunday, at 7 a.m., the article went live. By 7:05, it was everywhere. The headline screamed across every screen. "Behind the cancelled wedding, inside Sophia Reynolds' web of lies." The opening paragraph hit like a hammer. Once hailed as a fairy tale bride, Sophia Reynolds now faces mounting evidence of infidelity, financial manipulation, and a predatory prenuptial agreement designed to funnel her fiancé's fortune into her family's sinking empire. Every detail was there. Screenshots of her late-night texts with her boss, bank records showing her family's desperate debts, testimonies from business partners calling her father a con artist. Even the voicemail she left me, threatening to destroy me, transcribed word for word. Within an hour, the comments flipped. So she was the snake all along. That poor mom. Imagine being treated like that after everything. Ethan deserves so much better, and his mother deserves an apology. I sat at my kitchen table, hands shaking, scrolling through wave after wave of support. For weeks I had been the jealous, toxic mom. Now, I was the mother who sacrificed everything while vultures circled her son. By noon, major networks picked it up. Talk shows debated it. Hashtags flipped sides. Hashtag justice for Eleanor. Trending right under, hashtag exposed Sophia. And for the first time in months, I smiled without forcing it. But the real moment, the one that made my heart stop, came that evening. My doorbell rang. When I opened it, Ethan stood there, my son. His eyes were red, his face tired, but his shoulders, they didn't slump anymore. He looked like a man who would walk through fire and come out knowing exactly who stood with him. "Mom," he said, voice breaking, "I'm sorry." That was all it took. I pulled him into my arms, held him the way I had when he was 8 years old, promising to take care of me someday. Only this time, he was the one shaking against my shoulder. We stood there forever, words not even necessary. But when he finally pulled back, his jaw was set like stone. They're not getting away with this. Not Sophia, not her family. I should have listened. I should have seen. But I see now, and I'm with you. Always tears stung my eyes, but I smiled. Because that was all I ever wanted. Not revenge, not headlines, just my son back. The fallout for Sophia was brutal. Her boss fired her within 24 hours of the exposé. Her family's investment firm shut down after regulators opened an investigation. Invitations she once bragged about vanished. Her so-called friends unfollowed her one by one. And Sophia herself? She tried one last time to fight back. A shaky live stream, mascara running, crying about being misunderstood and pressured by her family. But the comments didn't buy it anymore. People spammed her feed with screenshots, links to the article, memes tearing her apart. For once, I didn't feel guilty watching her unravel, because this wasn't just karma. This was justice. Ethan sat next to me that night, scrolling through the chaos, shaking his head. "You know, Mom," he said, "she told me you were jealous. She made me think you were trying to ruin everything." I almost believed her. He paused, voice thick. "I don't anymore. I know now. You were the only one who ever had my back. I reach for his hand. I always will. Even if it cost me everything." And that's when I realized this whole nightmare hadn't just been about Sophia. It had been about me finding my voice again. For years, I stayed quiet, thinking sacrifice meant silence. But sometimes silence is exactly what liars need to keep winning. Speaking up, that was the real sacrifice. Risking the smear, the lawsuits, the humiliation. But it was worth it. Because now, the world knew the truth. And so did my son. That night, as the city lights shimmered outside my window, Ethan leaned back on the couch, exhausted but free. And I whispered to myself, "We made it. We survived." But deep down, I knew this wasn't just survival. It was the start of something new. A bond between mother and son reforged in fire. A promise that no matter who tried to tear us apart again, we'd stand together. And as for Sophia, let's just say, some people burn bridges. She torched the whole damn city. And now she's the one left standing in the ashes. You know what they don't tell you about surviving a storm? It's not just the rain that soaks you. It's the silence after. The quiet feels heavier than the noise ever did. And when the whirlwind around Ethan and me finally settled, I was left staring at the pieces of my life, wondering how to put them back together. In the weeks after the expose, our phones didn't stop buzzing. Calls from journalists, messages from strangers, invitations from people who suddenly wanted to collaborate with Ethan now that he was free of Sophia's claws. But the truth? Neither of us wanted any of it. We didn't want headlines. We didn't want interviews. We wanted quiet. So we took it. We turned the phones off. We ignored the emails. Ethan moved back into my apartment for a while, just until he found his footing again. And suddenly, it was like we were back in time. Back in that tiny 2-bedroom where it had always been just him and me against the world. One night, sitting at the kitchen table, he looked at me and said, "I forgot what this felt like. Just us. No lies, no drama, just home." I smiled, fighting the tears, because that's what I had wanted all along. Not money, not control, just my son. Of course, Sophia tried to claw her way back into relevance. She hired new lawyers. She filed appeals. She even tried to spin a new story about being pressured by her family into the prenup. But by then, nobody cared. The public had moved on. The sympathy well had dried up. And the more she fought, the more pathetic she looked. Meanwhile, Ethan was changing. I could see it in the way he carried himself, less naive, more grounded. He started rebuilding his startup, but with sharper eyes this time. He cut ties with shady investors, doubled down on his values, and refused to compromise just to get ahead. One afternoon, I found him staring at the scrapbook, the same one I had made before the wedding, the one Sophia dismissed as extra baggage. He flipped through the pages slowly, like he was reading a sacred book. When he closed it, he looked at me and said, "This isn't baggage, Mom. This is the reason I'm standing today. You're the reason." And in that moment, every night shift, every missed holiday, every insult I had swallowed, suddenly felt worth it. We even laughed again. Real laughter. Like the night we burned the old wedding invitation in the fireplace, watching the paper curl into ash. or when Ethan tried to cook spaghetti and nearly set off the smoke alarm. These were small things, but they felt like miracles, because they meant we were alive. We had made it through. But the real closure came weeks later, in a quiet moment I'll never forget. We were sitting in the park, watching kids run around, parents calling after them. Ethan turned to me and said, "Mom, I know I didn't always see it, but I do now. You've been my anchor my whole life. And I promise, from now on, nobody will ever come between us again." His words broke me open in the best way. I cried, right there on the park bench, while my grown son held my hand like he was the parent and I was the child. And for the first time in decades, I let myself lean on him. Because that's what healing looks like. Not grand gestures, not court victories, but simple, human moments of truth. Do I regret the pain? Of course, I wouldn't wish those months on anyone. But I also know this. Sometimes life has to break you to rebuild you stronger. Sophia thought she was cutting me out of the family. Instead, she welded my bond with Ethan into something unshakable. Now, when I look at him, I don't just see my son. I see a man who knows the cost of loyalty. A man who understands that love without truth is just another lie waiting to collapse. And I see myself, not just as a mother who sacrificed, but as a woman who finally found her voice. So if you ask me what I learned from all this, I'll tell you straight. Never let anyone convince you that silence is love. Sometimes silence is surrender. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do for the people you love is to speak the truth, even if it burns everything down. Because in the ashes, you just might find freedom. And as I sit here tonight, lights of San Francisco glittering outside my window, Ethan laughing in the kitchen while he burns another pot of spaghetti, I know one thing for certain. They tried to erase me, but I'm still here. And this time, I'll never be silent again. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of the power of truth, of family, and of never giving up, don't forget to hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it today, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to know, what would you have done in my shoes? And if you want more stories of resilience, betrayal, and justice served, make sure you subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss the next chapter.